This program was made possible by the law firm of Zalman and Schnorman, whose practice is limited to personal injury and insurance law. Welcome to Lawline with your host, Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman is a distinguished trial attorney, author, and lecturer. Each week, Lawline will bring you the most knowledgeable experts in the field of law today. And now, we introduce our guests and our host, Alan Schnorman.
Welcome to Lawline. At a time that the population is turned off to the inefficiency of government, Mark Green, public advocate for the City of New York, is out there combating waste and incompetency in the local bureaucracy. Today we'll find out what's working and what's not. We're happy to welcome back Mark Green, public advocate for the City of New York.
Thank you, Alan.
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I must be doing something right. You invite me back.
Okay, and what's the state of the city?
Getting better. It's a great city, but we can't coast on our oars. We have to make it even better. The big challenge is economic. The region has been doing very poorly compared to other regions. Job growth has been nearly flat, and with jobs flat and revenue down, the city has to shrink. And so one of the painful things that the mayor and all of us have to figure out is the public wants us to do more and spend less, and we have to square that circle.
Mark, for those viewers who do not know what the Public Advocate Office does, what do you do?
It's an official law line.
Okay.
My office, Public Advocate, is one of the 3 citywide elected offices, along with the mayor and the comptroller. It's the office next in line to the mayor. I preside over the city council, bang the gavel. I can introduce legislation. The real heart and soul, Alan, of the office is I'm the city's ombudsman. I'm the watchdog, blowing the whistle on waste when taxpayers pay for government and don't get it in return, when the water meter bill is too high and nobody's returning your call, for example, when the pothole is deep and eternal and never gets fixed, when the traffic sign is down and no one comes back for years. We try to make sure that the government is accountable and efficient. And so we answer 1,000 complaints a month, cut through red tape, and we try to do studies of what's right and wrong with city agencies and come up with new ideas like automatic teller machines in police precinct buildings, like our ideas on how to revamp and repair the Child Welfare Administration. And I think we're having a pretty big impact for an office that is quite small.
Let's talk about welfare. Now, lately that's been much in the news. What are you doing about the welfare system, the child welfare system in particular?
Well, early on I created a 6-person unit in my office because we were getting a crescendo of complaints from people in the system, from children themselves, from biological parents, from foster care parents. I sent a 100-page report to City Hall in September of '95 warning the mayor that by cutting caseworkers by so many, by eliminating administrative support help, that we had overworked, overwhelmed, anxious caseworkers. Children were going to fall through the cracks. You can't expect caseworkers to handle 30 and 40 cases and not have a problem. And then 2 months later, of course, 6-year-old Elisa Izquierdo was killed, presumably by her abusive mother. And so I created a unit called C-Plan, Child Planning and Advocacy Now, 33 leading child welfare advocates and analysts. And now myself and Comptroller Alan Hevesy and Assembly Chairman of the Child Welfare Committee, Roger Green of Brooklyn, and Steve DiBrienza, the Chairman of the City Council Child Committee, are coming together for a Child Welfare Summit. In March, we're having 15 officials from around the state and city to try to totally restructure how the Child Welfare Administration operates. We have 25 ideas to make sure that we reduce the number of children who are at risk and fall through the cracks.
Now, I know your agency did a whole study on health care. Health care is important to every single citizen out there. What's the story on that with HMOs?
Well, health care costs, Alan, were going up twice the rate of inflation. We had $500 thermometers at hospitals. It was ridiculous. And a lot of working people were among the 40 million uninsured in this country. I mean, are people in Canada and Britain smarter than us? They have a healthcare system which is the same quality at half the price. So HMOs, health maintenance organizations, arose to replace the very expensive system of fee-for-service medicine. Well, the good news is HMOs are cheaper, and the maintenance part of it, preventive health care, is great. So more women are tested for mammograms, and men for prostate cancer. The problem, though, we did a study of 12 HMOs in New York City, and too often they're delivering assembly line medicine, where they're cheaper because you don't get the care you need and deserve. I've heard a joke, HMOs are great and inexpensive except if you get sick.
Right.
They manage costs better than they manage care. So my office did a study, and I'll send a 20-page free version of it to anyone who writes me, discussing how these 12 HMOs perform, which are the worst in terms of complaints, which are the best in terms of more board-certified doctors disclosing more information. Since individual customers can't easily price compare among all these HMOs in this new era, the Office of Public Advocate did it for people.
And where do I get that report?
Anyone who wants it can write me at Public Advocate, 1 Center Street. The zip code is 10007, but it's free from us, but the post office still charges, so people have to send a 8.5 by 11 stamped, with 2 stamps, self-addressed envelope, and we'll send you the free summary.
What's this that's happening in the city, privatization? I hear that the hospitals are on the sale block. We just recently had some of the maintenance in the city schools have gone private. We're talking about putting the prisons into private hands. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's okay if there's a existing competitive marketplace, and it's not a function in government that only a public person should do. I mean, we could sell our police force, let IBM hire 30,000 people and run the police force. We could hire judges for a fee. But certain things have to be state-run. But if you're putting up traffic signs, for example, or you're repairing cars at the police department, for example, let an outside firm bid against municipal workers. Whoever does it cheapest should do it if they're held strictly accountable to contractual terms. Now, when it comes to hospitals, of course we have so-called private hospitals. Of course, most of the money coming to private hospitals are from public funds called Medicare and Medicaid. I'd be willing to listen to the privatization of hospitals if the mayor could show that it will be no more expensive and as or greater quality, and that the indigent will be cared for. That doesn't happen now. The indigent now often flood municipal hospitals, often their emergency rooms, because they don't have any other primary care options. And until the mayor can show that we can take care of the indigent, which is why municipal hospitals were created in the first place, how can we buy a pig in a poke?
Now, how does it work? Does the mayor just say, I'm going to sell Kings County Hospital, who wants to give me a bid? Or does he have to go to the city council and get permission before he even puts it on the sale
Well, in this
block?
instance, we have a mayor, not a dictator, and sometimes the mayor can administer on his own. He can pick a commissioner on his own, for example. But when it comes to selling hospitals, he'll need the cooperation and the approval of the city council. He just can't do it on his own, which is fine. If he can persuade a majority of the city council that it will save money and increase quality care, we're all for it. Queensborough President Claire Schulman said to the mayor, they get along extremely well, gee, can you show me that lower income people will be as well served? The mayor couldn't show it. A year later, he hasn't shown it. If he can't answer that threshold question, I can understand why the city council will balk and should balk.
Now, the mayor recently did not reappoint 2 court judges in Brooklyn to full terms.
Right.
And he appointed 2 others in their stead. How do you feel about that?
He overthrew a system of merit selection that Ed Koch created and David Dinkins continued, and it's wrong. Now, the problem is not that Rudy Giuliani is a bad guy. Who knows who his successor and his successor's successor would be? And if you have a governor or a mayor potentially picking their cronies to run the justice system, that's a problem. And so Ed Koch came up with a very good idea. You have a panel of experts forward 2 or 3 names to a mayor, and then the mayor picks from among those people. And if you don't like the people sent you, or who are up for it, you can turn them down and have other people who have been passed over, who have processed the merit selection. And Rudy Giuliani rejected that whole approach, and he runs the risk of partisanizing, politicizing the judiciary system, and I'm against that.
Well, how would you have approached it differently?
Well, he didn't appoint 2 people like on a whim. These were competent judges. They had passed the Bar Association. They had performed credibly. I happen to know and like one of the people he appointed, but that's just a personal opinion. I like Charles Posner. He appointed someone who flunked out of law school a couple of times. And then he said, well, it's fine to have flunked out of law school. It shows that he has tenacity. Well, great. I know people who are very tenacious. They shouldn't be judges. You need things other than tenacity. And I think the mayor is engaged in a patronage system that he ran against and opposed.
You're the public advocate. You're the ombudsman. How do you think the mayor is doing?
Depends on the area. I think the mayor is downsizing government necessarily. He did it through severance, voluntary buyouts originally, which I supported. I like the way he's trying to de-license unnecessary categories for business to lighten the load. I support that. Some of it's my legislation. I like the way he's taking down the smoking signs at Shea and Yankee stadiums. Kids see it. But I'm troubled how personally abusive and divisive he is. I'm troubled at how, for 2 years, he so disproportionately cut programs for children, Division of Youth Services, the Board of Education, Youth Line, for example, and the Child Welfare Administration, and wouldn't touch the bureaucracy at the police department. I don't mean cops on the streets. I like that there are more beat cops, but there's a lot of fat in the bureaucracy. We have $60,000 a year policemen and women doing work that $30,000 a year civilians could easily do in the management information systems, for example. And so he put kids in peril. And he's created an atmosphere of animosity by, for example, chasing Ray Cortinas out of town. And I just hope that we can have a leader of the city who is tough-minded but kind-hearted. And ideally, you can combine both.
If you were the mayor, how would you handle things differently?
That's too general a question. Alan, ask me a specific policy. I'm not mayor. I'm not running for mayor. And it's presumptuous to answer it like that. And now, if you ask me a policy question, I'll tell you. My job is to agree, when I agree with the mayor, to say so. We came together on how to break up the mob-influenced commercial carding cartel. We figured out this cartel was overcharging city businesses $500 million a year. Their fees were 1/3 too high, or 1/2 too high. There's now a Giuliani Green bill that's about to pass the city council. That's great.
Well, you're actually saying that that was mafia, organized crime control.
You said the word mafia. I don't know the different families, but law enforcement authorities have made it very clear, and the heads of the crime families were shown to have been convicted for working and running the trade association of the commercial carding cartel, and it absolutely was mob influenced. And 5 years ago, I began a campaign to break it up. When I was the Consumer Affairs Commissioner, I was a lonely voice. Eventually, we built up support. District Attorney Bob Morgenthau in New York County brought indictments against dozens of people and dozens of firms in the industry, and it worked. Now, Browning Ferris is in New York. USA Waste is coming to New York. Waste Management,
These are all major
the biggest firms in the country, finally are coming in. Price will fall, and commercial owners and commercial tenants will be the better for it. But when the mayor decimates the Child Welfare Administration, despite warning after warning, I will say he's putting kids at risk.
We're going to discuss that further right after the break. You're watching Lawline. We have with us Public Advocate Mark Green. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. Stay with us.
The air dances with the waters, which brings the rain that feeds the land, that is home to the animals. All life dances together.
In a world so connected, choosing one environmental cause can be hard. EarthShare is 40 environmental charities working together. You and your company can help by calling 1-800-MY-SHARE.
All life lives, or doesn't, together.
Excuse me, do you wear your safety belt?
Why, no, I don't wear my safety belt.
Thank you.
You could learn a lot from a dummy. Buckle your safety belt.
Hello, you're watching Lawline. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. Today we have Mark Green on with us, public advocate for the City of New York. Hello, Mark, again.
Welcome back.
Mark, before the break, you just was discussing about the child welfare system and what you would do if you were the mayor.
Well, first, you want to keep families together, and one of the ways to do that is to have substance abuse counseling. So mothers who happen to be on crack, some of them get off it. The mayor abolished substance abuse counseling in his family rehabilitation program. That's going exactly in the wrong direction. Second, you can't have caseworkers, as I said, with 30 or 50 cases each. You should have a limit of 15 cases per caseworker. So if they have to do home visits, they have the time to do home visits. That's not what happened in Elise's case. We now know that the caseworker said, oh, I can't get to it. I have 35 cases, for example. Third, we have to improve the work conditions and technology of these offices. They have 5x8 cards where they keep information instead of computers on the desk so they can know the prior history of the file as they have it. The Child Welfare Administration, newly named the Agency for Children's Services, should work with social service schools and public policy schools in terms of using their expertise and their professionals to train workers and walk them through the situation. Comptroller Alan Hevesy has an idea for a child advocacy board within CWA to monitor it all the time, and that's why Comptroller Hevesy and I are organizing this Child Welfare Summit in March.
Mark, how is the mayor's office doing on quality life crimes?
Well, there are new community courts, mostly in Manhattan, but some outside. Amanda Burden, my appointee to the city planning office, walked me around it. And they can, without involving the very expensive criminal justice system, take people who are loitering, drunkenness, urinating in public, things that are not felonies where you should send them to Attica, but still it reduces the quality of life for all of us. Get them, cite them, punish them, maybe they do community service, maybe they pay a fine. Also, when you do this often enough, and this is the Bratton theory, people are less likely to carry around guns because they know that if they're suspected of a quality of life crime, they'll be patted down, the gun will be found. There are fewer guns in our streets, fewer shootings, fewer gun deaths in the city. This is among the reasons that murder has gone down 25%. It's not good enough, but it's a good direction. I asked my office recently, how many people were killed the year I was born? 1945. I know you're shocked that I'm that old, all 3 months older than you, Alan. In 1945,
You gave away my age.
In 1945, there were 300 murders in New York City. In 1995, it went down to 1,600 murders, down from the prior year. It's still 5 times more than when I was growing up. And so we shouldn't get complacent that we're doing better when there's so much more to go.
Everybody's always concerned. You mentioned guns. I can't think of, I was told that at least in every subway car there may very well be one gun sitting in a pocket of
It's such a disaster. There are low-income zip codes in this city where the chance of a young black male being shot and killed is 6 times greater than a combat soldier in Vietnam being shot and killed. I mean, that's the definition of a war. I wish I had a good answer. 20 years ago, remember, there were hijackings. Everyone was very upset. And we figured out a way to have a gun-free zone called airports. We did it as a society. Let's have gun-free zones called cities. I mean, in this congested area, people aren't shooting animals, they're shooting children.
And what's your recommendation? How would you achieve that?
Well, there's a federal proposal of Bill Bradley and Chuck Schumer to have no more than 1 purchase of a gun per month. The city, Virginia now has that. We need a federal law doing that. We need to register, people who buy guns should register their guns like we register cars, since guns are less necessary than cars, but as dangerous as cars. You know, we need police on the lookout having anti-gun squads that anyone caught with a gun has to be penalized far more sharply than now.
Recently, the New York City Police Department was criticized by a federal court judge as to how the public views them in certain circumstances. How do you feel about that decision?
Well, you're talking about the Washington Heights decision of Judge Baer. He went way too far. He really did. Some people may be afraid of some police. And listen, police have occasionally been abusive. I mean, look at the 3-0 precinct, look at what the Mullen Commission found. But most police are honest. They're public servants. They take an oath of office. And for that judge to throw out what would be a likely conviction when a woman and others were found with pounds of crack in a car, because when people sprinted away from the cops at 5 a.m. walking toward a car with not New York City plates, he said it was rational for them to run away from the police. So the police lacked probable cause to inspect the car. I think that's ridiculous. It defames the whole police department, and it makes a mockery of justice.
Now, on the other side, there's Judge Harold Rothwachs, who in his recent book said the system isn't hard enough on criminals, and criminals are getting away with literally crimes and murder. How do you feel about that?
What is he talking about? 10 years ago, there were 15,000 people incarcerated in our state. Now there are 60,000 people incarcerated in our state. We spent billions of dollars for more prisons. There are more arrests, more convictions, and more incarceration in the last 10 years, certainly under Mayor Giuliani, as everyone agrees. If he wants to go back to Dodge City, where any time a police officer saw someone that they personally may not like and just pick them up without probable cause, without giving them, announcing their rights, that's not America. That judge is against the Miranda warning, and because of television, everyone understands that if you're arrested, why should you keep secret the rights a citizen has if the citizen happens to be ignorant of them? So they have a right to a lawyer to remain silent, etc. And I think that judge is out of another century. And I think he is as wrong in his right-wing direction as Judge Baer was in his decision in Washington Heights.
Well, what would be your position? Would it be more of a middle road?
Well, it's anybody can call it middle of the road or call it a banana. We have to be tough but fair. Bill Buckley, the famous conservative, was very tough on criminal justice, and then he had a friend who was falsely accused and indicted, and then he wanted his friend to have all the protections of the Constitution. The United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights, is what distinguishes us from Cuba, which I visited 8 years ago. I had long conversations with President Castro and asked him, how can you possibly throw people in jail who are simply speaking their opinion? If you had the confidence of your people, why are you so arbitrary? We had long debates about it. And if some of these conservatives want to go toward a Castro system of justice, that's not very conservative, is it? It's very ironic. Conservatives like Rothwachs and others attack the Bill of Rights and all these Miranda warnings. Well, but then later that day, there's a suspect of big government abusing people. Well, government can abuse people, which is why the Bill of Rights is a wall protecting citizens from abuse of government.
On a more personal note, what's the future of Mark Green going to look like?
Well, I'm going to have a very bad year next year. My 11th grade daughter is going to college, and my wife and I are already very anxious about it. I have 2 children. I basically wanted to condition feeding her on the goal that she never leave home. Apparently, you're not allowed to do this in the modern society.
And on a political front?
Oh, I see. I wanted to focus on policies, not politics, from at least my first couple of years. And so I focused on defining and defending this newly named office, Alan. I've done it. I think we've put it on the map. We've saved a lot of people their money and their health. Because of the number of people who come up to me looking for a strong Democrat to run against either Rudy Giuliani or Senator Al D'Amato, I absolutely have an obligation to figure out what I'll do in the next election cycle. And toward the spring, which is time enough, I'll decide whether I next run for re-election as public advocate in 1997. And then take a look at the D'Amato Senate seat in 1998. I'm not a big fan of Senator Alphonse McCarthy. If you look at his 50 hearings into Whitewater and ignoring New York City at the same time. Or in 1997, not run for re-election and run against Mayor Giuliani, hoping that we have a mayor who is tough on crime and the budget, but is compassionate to all the elements of our city.
Now, Mayor Giuliani has been known as the no-nonsense mayor. How do you feel about that?
It's fine to have no nonsense, although having a sense of humor like Ed Koch isn't bad either. What I object to is the hostile, angry, government by enemies list approach that he brings to an issue. He doesn't have to agree with any of us. But when he calls people who happen in good faith to disagree with him, who are elected just like him, idiots and imbeciles, he's dividing an already anxious city. And you may like or not like President Clinton, for example, but he'll sit down with Senator Bob Dole to get a bill through, even though Dole's announced he wants to run Air Force One. Well, if Clinton can sit down with Dole, if Mandela can sit down with de Klerk, who imprisoned him, you think Mayor Giuliani could sit down with Democrats who have the city's interest at mind, in their hearts and minds every bit as much as he does.
Well, what's your opinion? Mayor Giuliani, of course, is running New York City, which is a polyglot of population. Is he bringing us together, or is he pulling us apart?
Well, I think he's pulling us apart. I go to a lot of synagogues and black churches every other week, and unfortunately, this is a statement of fact, not desire. He is very popular with one racial community and extremely unpopular with the other racial community. Ideally, we could have a chief executive who is at least mixed popularity, but it's not based on a racial divide. And so often the cuts in the budget have taken the hide out of communities which are poorer and more minority. Is that a coincidence? Is it a philosophy? The minority community is extremely anxious in this city at a time of economic distress, and the mayor has a hard job, but we pay him to do it well. And at the moment, I actually see a lot of quiet racial tension in this city.
Well, is it possible to be elected in the New York City as mayor without the support of minority communities?
Sure. He was elected without the support of the minority community in 1993, narrowly. Could he be re-elected again, opposed by 90% of the African American community and 70% of the Latino community? Yes, it could happen. I'd like to see a campaign where a white candidate gets more black votes than a black opponent, and a black opponent gets more white votes. It's not so fantastical. Mario Cuomo got a larger percentage of the Jewish vote against Lou Lehrman, who was Jewish, and Lehrman got a higher percentage of the Italian vote against Mario Cuomo. There's something appealing in that people vote based on their idea of merit and the future rather than just tribal views.
Well, there are more Democrats in the city of New York than Republicans. Yet, of course, we have a Republican mayor currently. What about as far as Hispanics and African Americans? What's the population there?
25% of the city is African American. About 22% is Latino, mostly Puerto Rican, but the Dominican community is growing rapidly. About 7% Asian. And the city now is a minority city. Language fails us. And New York has changed from the Irish influx to the Italian influx to the Jewish influx to the black population growing, now the Latino. I don't doubt in a century there'll be, or certainly earlier, there'll be an Asian mayor because they've gone from 1% to who knows. And that's the glory of New York City. Everyone can come here and succeed if you work hard and play by the rules.
Who are the immigrants coming in now? Is it the Asians?
Well, the Asians recently have been coming in, but Russian Jews have been coming back. I'm the grandson of Russian Jews, and now there's a new generation coming into places like Brighton Beach and Coney Island.
Mark Green, public advocate, thank you very much for coming on Lawline once more. And as always, this is Alan Schnorman. Thank you for watching Lawline.
You have been watching Lawline with your host, New York trial attorney Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman will be back with you next week at the same time. If you have any questions about this week's program, please write to Lawline, 63 Wall Street, New York, New York, 10005, or call area code 212-432-9111. This program was made possible by the law firm of Zalman and Schnorman, whose practice is limited to personal injury and insurance law.